December 1942, North Africa. Somewhere in the hills above Kasserine Pass, a Wehrmacht colonel leaned against his Panzer IV, watching American troops stumble through their first real test against the Afrika Korps. He turned to his adjutant and laughed, the kind of laugh reserved for amateurs wandering into a professional's arena. "They send us a cowboy," he said, flicking ash from his cigarette. "This Patton, he is all noise, all theater. A parade general. He will bleed his men dry trying to prove himself, and we will send him home in a box lined with his own arrogance." The colonel didn't know it yet, but he was watching the dress rehearsal for his own defeat. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. Every week we uncover the stories the world forgot. What the colonel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that George Patton wasn't just noise. He was calculation wrapped in bravado, a mind that devoured Clausewitz and Caesar while his mouth delivered profanity-laced sermons on speed and violence. And back in Washington, in a quiet office thick with cigar smoke and the weight of global war, Army Chief of Staff George C. Marshall sat with a problem that kept him awake. Patton could win battles faster than any commander alive. He could also lose the war just as quickly if left unchecked. Marshall saw genius. He also saw a loaded gun pointed in every direction at once, including his own side. Patton wasn't born in a vacuum. He arrived in North Africa trailing decades of preparation, a lifetime spent transforming himself into a weapon of mobile warfare. He'd studied tank tactics in France during the Great War, watching the lumbering Mark IVs churn through mud while cavalry officers sneered at the mechanical beasts. He'd seen the future where others saw novelty. By 1940, while America still slept, Patton commanded the 2nd Armored Division, drilling his men in the California desert until they moved like a single organism of steel and exhaust fumes. He demanded speed, not reckless charges, but calculated velocity that collapsed enemy decision-making timelines. His tanks, the M4 Shermans, weren't the best machines on any battlefield. They carried a 75mm gun that fired a 17-pound shell at 2,000 feet per second. Adequate, but not dominant. The Sherman's 5-man crew sat in a hull armored to 3 inches at the front, just enough to stop most German 50mm rounds at range, but painfully vulnerable to the long-barreled 75mm guns mounted on Panzer IVs and the monstrous 88mm anti-aircraft guns the Wehrmacht repurposed for tank killing. Top speed on roads reached 25 miles per hour, 30 if you pushed the 4J V8 engine and ignored the protests of your maintenance crews. The Sherman wasn't a superior tank. It was an available tank, a producible tank, a tank that could cross an ocean and keep moving when German Panthers broke down after 50 miles. Patton understood this. He didn't worship his equipment. He worshipped movement. But movement without discipline was suicide, and Patton's early weeks in North Africa nearly proved it. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, American forces, green, scattered, led by officers who still thought in terms of static defense, met Rommel's Afrika Korps in the worst possible circumstances. The Germans punched through American lines like a fist through wet paper, killing over 3,000 Americans, capturing another 3,000, destroying hundreds of vehicles. Patton arrived in the aftermath, inheriting a demoralized II Corps that had learned the hard truth. Enthusiasm didn't stop armor-piercing rounds. He imposed order through sheer force of will and regulation. Helmets would be worn, ties would be tied, salutes would be crisp. Men who just watched their friends burn inside knocked-out Shermans were suddenly required to polish boots and shave daily. It seemed insane. It was calculated. Patton knew broken units needed visible structure, external discipline to rebuild internal confidence. He told his officers, "We're going to attack, and we're going to keep attacking until we're victorious or dead." Not exactly Eisenhower's diplomatic touch, but Patton wasn't interested in diplomacy. He was interested in momentum. The doctrine he hammered into II Corps became legendary for its simplicity, audacity of movement, violence of action, exploitation to exhaustion. Patton studied German commanders, like a chess master analyzing opponents' games. He knew they expected caution from green American forces, so he gave them the opposite. His basic tactical principle: identify the enemy's flank, hit it with overwhelming force, and don't stop to count bodies or consolidate gains. keep moving, force the enemy to react faster than their command structure allowed, create chaos in their decision cycle. It was maneuver warfare before the term became doctrine, and it required one thing American industry could provide in abundance: fuel. Patton's divisions consumed gasoline like dying men gulping water. A single armored division needed 30,000 gallons per day just to stay operational. In full offensive operations, that number doubled. But America's industrial base was turning crude oil into refined gasoline at rates that staggered Axis planners. By 1943, the United States produced over 4 million barrels of oil per day. Germany and Japan combined, less than 1 million. Patton didn't just command tanks. He commanded an energy advantage that made German efficiency look quaint. Marshall watched from Washington, reading after-action reports with a mixture of pride and dread. Patton delivered results. At El Getter in March 1943, his 2 corps stopped an entire German armored division cold, then counterattacked so viciously the Germans abandoned equipment they couldn't recover. Patton's tanks destroyed 30 German panzers in a single afternoon, demonstrating that American crews, properly led, properly positioned, could trade kills with the vaunted Wehrmacht. But Marshall also read the other reports. Patton slapping enlisted men in field hospitals, calling them cowards, his face purple with rage, while traumatized soldiers shook with combat fatigue. Patton making wildly optimistic predictions about timetables, promising to capture cities before logistics could support the advance, forcing supply officers into impossible positions. Patton feuding with British commanders, with American peers, with anyone who suggested caution or coordination. Marshall understood the equation. Patton's genius required containment. Left to his own devices, he'd win battles and create diplomatic disasters, political catastrophes, logistical nightmares. He'd get men killed through sheer impatience, but controlled, aimed like a precision weapon at carefully chosen targets. Patton could shorten the war by months, maybe years. The test came in Sicily, July 1943. Operation Husky aimed to seize the island as a springboard into mainland Europe, and Marshall gave Patton the 7th Army, while British General Bernard Montgomery commanded the 8th Army. On paper, a joint operation requiring coordination and mutual support. In practice, a race between 2 massive egos with radically different styles. Montgomery was methodical, cautious, unwilling to advance until every supply line was secured and every contingency planned. Patton was a hurricane in a general's uniform. The operation began on July 10th, with the largest amphibious assault yet attempted. Over 2,000 ships delivering 160,000 men onto hostile beaches under fire. Patton's forces hit the southern coast, while Montgomery aimed for the eastern shore, both converging on Messina at the island's northeastern tip. The plan called for careful advance, clearing resistance systematically. Patton looked at the map and saw something else. A chance to beat Montgomery to Messina and prove once and for all that American audacity trumped British caution. He drove his divisions north through Sicily's interior with a speed that terrified his own staff officers. His 2nd Armored Division covered 100 miles in 72 hours, fighting through German rearguards, negotiating mountain roads designed for donkeys, not Shermans, refueling on the move from trucks that raced ahead to establish temporary dumps. Patton personally rode near the front, standing in his jeep, pearl-handled revolvers on his hips like some anachronistic gunfighter transplanted into mechanized warfare. His presence wasn't symbolic. Soldiers who saw their commanding general eating dust alongside them found reserves of energy they didn't know they possessed. Patton reached Palermo on July 22nd, 10 days ahead of schedule, capturing the city and its port facilities before the Germans could demolish them completely. Montgomery was still methodically clearing the eastern coast, measuring advance in yards while Patton measured his in miles. But speed had costs. On August 3rd, Patton visited the 93rd Evacuation Hospital near Nicosia. He moved through rows of wounded men, offering encouragement, asking about their units. Then he encountered Private Charles Kull, sitting on a cot, no visible wounds, shaking. Patton asked what was wrong. Kull said his nerves were shot. He couldn't take it anymore. Something broke in Patton's mind. He saw cowardice where there was trauma, weakness where there was invisible injury. He slapped Kull across the face with his gloves, called him a coward, threatened to have him shot. The tent fell silent. Patton stormed out, leaving wounded men staring in shock. A week later, he did it again, slapping Private Paul Bennett at the 15th Evacuation Hospital, pulling his pistol, waving it while screaming about yellow-bellied sons of bitches. Word reached Eisenhower within days. Marshall learned shortly after. The slapping incidents revealed Patton's fundamental flaw. He couldn't separate tactical genius from personal demons. His understanding of warfare was sophisticated, nuanced, brilliant. His understanding of human psychology was primitive, cruel, shaped by 19th century notions of courage that had no place in modern combat. Marshall faced a decision: court-martial Patton and lose the most aggressive commander in the European theater, or cover it up and hope the problem didn't metastasize. Marshall chose containment. Eisenhower reprimanded Patton privately, forced him to apologize to the soldiers and medical staff, but kept him in command. The press got wind of the story, but agreed to bury it temporarily. Wartime censorship still held weight. Patton remained useful, but now he was also radioactive. Marshall had his weapon, but he'd learned it could explode in his hand. Sicily fell on August 17th, when Patton's forces entered Messina hours before Montgomery's leading elements arrived. Patton stood on the dock, grinning like a wolf, as British tanks rolled into town behind him. He'd won the race. He'd also proven that American forces, properly led and supplied, could move faster and hit harder than any army in the world. German commanders who dismissed American fighting quality in North Africa filed very different reports after Sicily. One panzer officer wrote in his diary, "This Patton moves like Rommel, but with 10 times the resources. If they give him a free hand in France, we cannot stop him. We can only delay him and die trying." The mockery was dying. The respect was growing. And Marshall, reading intelligence summaries in Washington, knew the next act would either vindicate his faith in Patton or destroy them both. The winter of 1943 stretched cold and uncertain across England, where hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, trained for the invasion everyone knew was coming, but no one could name aloud. Patton should have been there, planning, preparing, commanding armies for the greatest amphibious assault in history. Instead, he sat in virtual exile, commanding a phantom formation, the first United States Army group, a fiction constructed from radio traffic and dummy equipment designed to convince German intelligence that the invasion would strike at Calais, not Normandy. Marshall had sidelined his best attacker to serve as bait in a deception campaign. It was humiliation disguised as necessity, and Patton knew it. But he also understood Marshall's calculus. Prove you can follow orders, prove you can be controlled, and maybe, you'll get another chance to do what you do best. That chance came in France, though not at the beginning. When Allied forces stormed Normandy on June 6, 1944, Patton watched from England, sidelined while other commanders earned glory on the beaches. Omar Bradley commanded 1st Army. Bernard Montgomery commanded 21st Army Group. Patton commanded nothing but illusions. German intelligence bought the deception completely, holding 15 divisions near Calais, waiting for Patton's fictional army to materialize. Divisions that could have slaughtered Americans struggling through hedgerow country. Patton's absence was his greatest contribution to D-Day success, a fact that must have burned like acid in his gut. But Marshall's strategy was working. Keep Patton in reserve. Let the Germans fear him. Then unleash him when the breakout begins. The breakout came in late July with Operation Cobra, Bradley's sledgehammer blow that shattered German lines south of St. Lo. Thousands of tons of bombs turned 3 square miles of Norman countryside into a moonscape, pulverizing German positions and opening a corridor for American armor. On August 1st, Patton finally received his command. 3rd Army, freshly activated, consisting of 4 corps and 12 divisions, over 200,000 men, thousands of tanks and trucks, hundreds of artillery pieces, all waiting for someone to point them at Germany and say go. Patton said go at a speed that made Sicily look cautious. 3rd Army exploded through the Cobra breach, like water through a broken dam. Patton's operational concept was elegant and brutal. Bypass strong points, ignore flanks, drive deep into the enemy rear, destroy command posts and supply dumps, create chaos faster than German commanders could process information. His four corps moved on parallel axes, covering 20 to 30 miles per day through French countryside, swallowing towns and villages so quickly that French resistance fighters couldn't coordinate celebrations before American armor vanished over the next horizon. Within a week, Third Army advanced 70 miles. Within 2 weeks, they'd liberated Chartres, Le Mans, and Orleans, cutting behind the entire German 7th Army, still trying to contain the Normandy beachhead. German commanders who'd fought on the Eastern Front against Soviet offensives had never experienced anything like Patton's pace. The Soviets advanced with massive artillery preparation, grinding forward with infantry and armor in coordinated waves. Patton advanced with speed as his artillery, moving so fast that German reserves arrived to find American flags already flying over their objectives. The Falaise pocket operation in mid-August demonstrated both Patton's brilliance and Marshall's wisdom in constraining him. German forces trapped in Normandy attempted to escape east through a narrowing corridor near Falaise. Patton's Third Army drove north, Bradley's First Army pushed south, and Montgomery's forces pressed from the west, creating a pocket containing over 100,000 German soldiers. Patton saw an opportunity to close the pocket completely, to trap and destroy the entire force, potentially ending the war before Christmas. He drove his 4th Armored Division north toward Argenton, ready to meet Canadian forces pushing south from Falaise, sealing the trap. But Bradley, under pressure from Montgomery and concerned about coordination failures, ordered Patton to halt at Argenton. The pocket remained open for days, allowing 30 to 50,000 Germans to escape before the gap finally closed on August 21st. Patton was furious, raging against Bradley, against Montgomery, against anyone who'd stopped him from completing what he saw as the killing blow. He was probably right tactically. Closing the pocket sooner would have destroyed more German divisions, captured more equipment, shortened the war. But Marshall, monitoring the situation from Washington, saw something Patton couldn't: the political complexity of Allied command, Montgomery's pride, British public opinion, the delicate balance of Anglo-American cooperation. These weren't battlefield factors Patton cared about, but they were strategic realities Marshall couldn't ignore. Let Patton close the pocket unilaterally, upstage Montgomery publicly, and risk fracturing Allied unity at the moment of maximum success? Marshall had learned the hard way that Patton required constraints, not just for Patton's sake, but for the coalition's survival. Even with the gap open, Falaise was catastrophic for German forces. When the pocket finally collapsed, Allied forces counted 50,000 prisoners, 10,000 dead, and hundreds of destroyed vehicles stretched along roads that resembled junkyards of twisted steel and burned flesh. The smell hung over Normandy for weeks: oil, cordite, and death baking under August sun. A German major captured at Falaise wrote in his diary before internment, "We were told Patton was a showman, a fraud, a general for newsreels. We learned otherwise. His army moves like a living thing, thinking faster than our commanders can react. They don't fight to capture ground. They fight to destroy us, completely. And they have the fuel and ammunition to do it without pause. We cannot win against such resources married to such aggression." By September, Patton stood on the Moselle River, Third Army having advanced 400 miles in 30 days, liberating most of France with fewer casualties than predicted by any pre-invasion planning. His divisions consumed 400,000 gallons of gasoline daily, ammunition by the trainload, replacement soldiers and vehicles in numbers that would have bankrupted any other nation's war effort. But American factories produced Shermans at a rate of 2,000 per month. American oil fields and refineries generated fuel faster than Patton could burn it. American training camps graduated tank crews in 8 weeks, adequate if not expert, but adequate multiplied by abundance became overwhelming. Germany couldn't replace a Panther. Patton lost 5 Shermans and had 10 more delivered before the wrecks stopped smoking. The arithmetic of attrition favored quantity over quality when quantity arrived on trains that never stopped rolling. Then came the fuel crisis. Eisenhower, managing logistics for multiple armies advancing on Germany simultaneously, faced a simple problem. Not enough trucks and tankers existed to supply everyone at maximum pace. He had to choose: supply Montgomery's 21st Army Group for a thrust into northern Germany, or supply Patton's Third Army for a drive toward the Saar and Frankfurt, or supply both inadequately. Eisenhower chose Montgomery, diverting fuel and supplies to support Operation Market Garden, the ambitious airborne assault aimed at seizing bridges across the Rhine. Patton's fuel allocation dropped to a trickle. Third Army ground to a halt not from German resistance, but from empty tanks. Patton threatened, pleaded, cursed, and scrounged, sending his staff officers to borrow supplies from other units, forging requisition orders, doing everything short of outright theft to keep moving. He failed. Market Garden launched on September 17th and failed spectacularly, costing thousands of paratroopers and achieving nothing strategic. Patton watched from the Moselle, convinced he could have been in Germany by October if Eisenhower had given him Montgomery's fuel. Marshall received Patton's complaints through official channels and unofficial back channels, long screeds about British influence and wasted opportunities. He filed them and said nothing publicly, but privately. Marshall agreed with parts of Patton's assessment. Montgomery had proven methodical to the point of paralysis. Patton had proven fast to the point of recklessness. The ideal commander would combine both qualities. Since that ideal didn't exist, Marshall played them against each other, using Montgomery's caution to balance Patton's aggression, using Patton's results to pressure Montgomery into moving faster. It was coalition management a strategic art, and it required keeping Patton productive, but contained, successful but controllable. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 revealed exactly why Marshall tolerated Patton, despite the headaches. On December 16th, Germany launched its last major offensive in the West, throwing 3 armies through the Ardennes forest in a desperate attempt to split Allied forces and capture Antwerp. The offensive caught American forces off guard, creating a bulge in Allied lines that threatened to break through to the Meuse River. Eisenhower called an emergency conference at Verdun on December 19th, bringing together his senior commanders to coordinate response. The room was tense, the mood grim. Then Patton walked in, looked at the map, and said, "Hell, let's have the guts to let the bastards go all the way to Paris. Then we'll really cut them off and chew them up." Everyone stared. Patton was serious. He saw opportunity where others saw crisis. Eisenhower asked when Patton could attack north into the Bulge's southern flank. Patton said, "December 22nd, with 3 divisions." 3 days. The room erupted in disbelief. Patton's Third Army was oriented east, engaged with German forces along the Saar, reorienting an entire army 90 degrees north, disengaging from current battles, moving hundreds of thousands of men and thousands of vehicles over icy roads in winter, attacking prepared German positions in 72 hours. It was impossible. Except Patton had already started. Before leaving for Verdun, he'd given his staff conditional orders, telling them to prepare movement plans for an attack north. When Eisenhower confirmed the mission, Patton simply executed what he'd already set in motion. Third Army's reorientation remains one of the most impressive logistical achievements of the war. 4 divisions, the 4th Armored, 26th Infantry, 80th Infantry, and later the 5th Infantry, disengaged from the Saar, traveled over icy roads in a snowstorm, and launched coordinated attacks into the Bulge's southern shoulder on December 22nd exactly as Patton promised. The 4th Armored Division drove north toward Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne Division held surrounded, desperately low on ammunition and medical supplies. German forces outnumbered the paratroopers, pounding them with artillery, waiting for surrender. On December 26th, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, one of Patton's favorite tankers, led the 4th Armored spearhead into Bastogne, breaking the siege. Patton arrived shortly after, greeting the 101 Estes commander with characteristic bluntness. "How are you, General?" The reply, "We're ready to attack." Patton grinned. These were his kind of soldiers. The Bulge campaign through January 1945 ground down German offensive capability beyond recovery. Patton's Third Army, attacking from the south, while Hodge's First Army pressed from the north, collapsed the Bulge systematically, destroying German divisions that Hitler could not replace. The Wehrmacht committed its last mobile reserves, its newest tanks, its best-trained troops, and lost them all in frozen forests for gains measured in miles before retreat. American casualties were heavy, over 80,000 in total across all units, but German losses exceeded 120,000, including irreplaceable panzer divisions and experienced infantry. After the Bulge, Germany could defend but not attack. Patton had helped transform Hitler's gamble into Germany's death sentence. A panzer commander captured during the Bulge's collapse wrote in his interrogation report, "We were told Patton was in the Saar, that we had weeks before he could threaten our flank. He arrived in days. His tanks appeared everywhere, faster than our intelligence could track them. We learned to fear not just his armor but his speed, his willingness to attack, and whether that grounded everyone else. He fights like a man with unlimited resources, because he has unlimited resources. The war is lost. We are simply waiting for him to finish us." Marshall read the report and permitted himself a brief smile. Patton was doing exactly what Marshall needed, breaking German will as much as German armies, creating a psychological weight that no amount of battlefield skill could overcome. But Marshall also read other reports, Patton making inflammatory statements about the Soviets, predicting future conflict, suggesting America should rearm German units to fight Russia. Patton was thinking past Germany's defeat to Cold War scenarios that, while prescient, were diplomatically catastrophic to voice in 1945. Marshall sent warnings through Eisenhower. Keep Patton focused on Germany. Keep his mouth shut about politics. Keep him winning battles and not creating international incidents. The final phase came in March 1945, when Third Army crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim on March 22nd without waiting for Eisenhower's formal approval, without elaborate preparation, without the massive artillery bombardments Montgomery used days earlier at Wesel. Patton simply sent assault boats across at night, established a bridgehead, then called Eisenhower to report success as a fait accompli. By the time permission arrived, Third Army had a bridge operational and armor pouring across. Patton's message to Bradley was pure Patton. "Brad, don't tell anyone, but I'm across." He wanted to be first, ahead of Montgomery, ahead of anyone else, proving once again that audacity beat caution. Within days, Third Army raced into central Germany, liberating concentration camps, seizing industrial cities, advancing so rapidly that German resistance collapsed into chaos. By April, Patton's forces covered over 200 miles in 2 weeks, reaching Czechoslovakia and Austria. The scoreboard by war's end told the story Marshall wanted told. Third Army, from activation in August 1944 to Germany's surrender in May 1945, advanced farther and faster than any American army in history. They fought for 281 days, liberated or captured over 82,000 square miles of territory, took over 1.4 million prisoners, and killed or wounded over 550,000 enemy soldiers. Third Army's casualties were approximately 137,000 total, 21,000 killed, 99,000 wounded, 16,000 missing. The kill ratio favored Patton roughly 4-1. His divisions destroyed or captured thousands of German vehicles, hundreds of tanks, artillery pieces beyond counting. They did it by moving faster than German commanders could think, attacking before defensive positions solidified, exploiting success until fuel or ammunition forced halts. They did it with Sherman tanks that German crews initially mocked and eventually feared, not for individual superiority, but for sheer overwhelming numbers backed by logistics no Axis nation could match. Today, in the museum at Fort Knox, Kentucky, sits one of Patton's command tanks, a Sherman restored to operational condition. The placard notes specifications: 75mm main gun, 3 machine guns, armor up to 3 inches, Ford GAA engine producing 500 horsepower, capable of 25 miles per hour on roads. Tourists photograph it, admire the white star painted on the hull, imagine what it felt like to ride into battle behind that steel. What they don't see in the museum. Marshall believed Patton was a genius because the results proved it. Hundreds of miles gained, enemy armies shattered, the war shortened by months through sheer aggressive momentum. Marshall also believed Patton was a danger because the incidents proved it. Slapping soldiers, defying orders, making political statements that threatened Allied unity. The genius won battles. The danger nearly lost the peace. Marshall's achievement wasn't discovering Patton's talent. It was harnessing that talent without letting it destroy everything around it, aiming the weapon at Germany and keeping it pointed there until victory came. Patton was the spear tip of American power, sharp and deadly, and always threatening to cut its own wielder. Marshall held the spear, aimed it true, and let it strike until the enemy fell. That was generalship of a different order. Not commanding armies, but commanding commanders. Not winning battles, but managing the volatile human instruments that won battles. In the end, Marshall was right about both assessments. Patton was a genius. Patton was a danger. And controlled genius, dangerous but directed, helped crush the Third Reich beneath American steel and speed and unstoppable industrial might. If you love untold stories from history's darkest hours, subscribe and join us on the next mission through time.